Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar about Mozilla's Creative Media Track Awards. We're so excited for the opportunity. So I am saying hello. I'm Lindsay Frost Dodson. I lead awards at Mozilla. And I'm joined today by my two colleagues, Brett Gaylor, who is the creative genius behind this awards track, and Jen Beard, who has been an incredible force behind getting this year's track up and going. So we will be going over the track and its requirements and goals, and then we will be talking about the application timeline, and then we'll wrap it up by answering your questions that you had previously submitted for today's call. So let's jump in. So as some of you might know, Mozilla is a nonprofit who exists primarily to protect and promote the internet as a global public resource, open and accessible to all. We exist to protect and promote a healthy internet. And so as a critical part of that work, we invest through fellowships and awards in the leaders really working on the front lines of making the internet more open, accessible, healthy, decentralized, inclusive. And so these awards are a really critical part of that mission. And so I'm excited to have Brett talk about the goals of these awards tracks, because our awards overall are about promoting and supporting promising approaches to making the internet healthier, and creative media awards are just one track through which we do that. So Brett, do you want to talk more about it?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay. So I think that the first thing that we want to talk about today is why Mozilla and our other partners in the NetGain initiative feel that this is an urgent issue. So Jen, you want to just take me to that slide? This is the only part during this webinar that I'm going to read something, but I wanted to do this because there's an excerpt from a paper called Automation in the Quantified Society that the NetGain partners released as part of our commitment to this area of focus. And so the quote is that powerful institutions are increasingly using computers to automate decisions that matter to people's lives. Artificial intelligence and other advances in software development, pervasive data collection, and vanishingly cheap computing power are working together to drive considerable change, creating what some have called the quantified society. NetGain funders and the social sector at large are deeply committed to protecting civil and human rights, defending the vulnerable, and building a more humane and equitable world. Meanwhile, technological change is sweeping the landscape, creating both new opportunities and new needs. The current moment demands careful thought and sustained attention, informed by both deeply held values and technical insight. So I encourage everyone applying to this track to read that paper, and we have links to that in the call for proposals. But Jen, you want to take to the next slide? I think that what this quote underlines for us is that the Creative Media Awards, while we're focusing on artificial intelligence and machine learning, when we talk about these issues, we're really not talking about the Terminator or Skynet, or a future in which humans have become smarter than us and are enslaving us. That would be a bad outcome, but what we're talking about with these Creative Media Awards are issues that we're seeing right now in the present, and how those issues are intersecting with themes of social justice, equity, and an inclusive society. So take us to the next slide, Jen. As an example of that, I wanted just to point out some headlines from the news that really speak to the issues that Mozilla and other partners in civil society are concerned about right now. So this is go to the next slide, the machine bias slide, Jen. This is a screen grab from an investigative report that ProPublica has done that explored ways in which automation and machine learning are intersecting with the criminal justice system. So one of these ways is to predict whether defendants are likely to recommit a crime. We're still waiting for the slides to catch up here, folks. We're not talking about Terminator, or I'll or Arnold Schwarzenegger at this point. We're talking about a real example of a case where two defendants, two people eligible for bail were being assessed by a system that looked at their potential to reoffend, their recidivism rate. And so in these two cases, it looked at two people who had both been convicted of petty theft arrests, Vernon Prater and Brescia Borden. Now, the system actually felt that Brescia was at a much higher risk than Vernon, even though Vernon had actually had much more serious previous offenses, armed robbery, and while Brescia did not have very serious prior offenses. And in fact, the system turned out to be wrong. The white defendant went on to commit a grand theft auto while there was zero subsequent offenses for the black defendant. So the conclusion of ProPublica's investigation is that the data that trained this algorithm was in fact biased. It was informed by a justice system that disproportionately incarcerates black people. And so we need to ask, is this system helpful in predicting the future, or is it simply reinforcing problems of the past? If you go to the next slide, it sort of shows that the future is really hard to predict, including the future uses of your data. So what we should be looking at here is a report from The Guardian about how researchers at Stanford had recently published a very controversial paper that claimed to be able to predict with 91% accuracy whether a Facebook user was gay or straight based only on a photograph. The paper was extremely controversial for its methodology, and it raised this larger question of consent. Did the users whose photographs were analyzed by this artificial intelligence algorithm understand they would be processed by such an algorithm when they took a selfie? And so users live in a present where their data is being used in ways they may not understand. So it's up to us as media makers to help folks understand these issues. Go to the next slide. It's important to note that there is good news around this area. Due to public and internal pressure, institutions like Google are acknowledging their public responsibility and have published principles that include avoiding unfair bias. And there are many positive futures that we can highlight and aspire to. So these images are from a speculative design project called Bots by Kevin Gaunt, and it predicts a home in which the user can deputize robots to interact with one another, to randomly bring joy, play, and health into our lives. And so I highlight this example because we encourage makers to highlight the opportunities of AI and algorithms, as well as those things that we need to prevent. So that's sort of a snapshot of what we see as the sort of current concerns and opportunities around how these automated decision-making processes are intersecting with the public sphere. And so, Jen, if you want to go to the next slide, that sort of sets the stage for what particular awards we're awarding here. The Creative Media Awards are a track to support promising approaches to engaging audiences around AI and machine learning through screen-based media. So the promising part of that is important to highlight. We want to encourage folks to be experimental and to pursue a variety of forms as they're making their media. There will be 7 awards, 2 in the $50,000 category, which includes a stipend to attend the Mozilla Festival, and 5 awards at the $25,000 level. And the things that we want to support here are those interactive experiences, videos, games, and other media that serve to increase that public awareness and understanding about these opportunities and these challenges. Go to the next slide in terms of criteria. This came up a lot for folks after the call about what stage of projects we want to support. We want to support projects that are either at the conceptual or prototype stage. So what this means that we wouldn't support is projects that are already finished, or projects for whom you might have an idea of a topic that you want to explore, but really not an approach yet of how you'd want to pursue that project. Works must be freely available on the web. So we don't support work that is primarily for offline consumption or that users would need to pay to experience. Work should be suitable for a non-expert audience. So we think about these issues a lot internally at Mozilla and with other colleagues and other organizations. We want to create work that will spark those conversations for the first time among audiences. So if your audience is another policymaker or another person that's very embedded in the digital rights community, this might not be the track for you. And projects must include ways to sort of measure whether audiences have used them and have interacted with them, but that needs to be done in a privacy respecting way. So we want to encourage work that is going to be shared, that's going to encourage people to take action or potentially change their behavior online. But we really insist that that's done in a way that users are aware of and is transparent and that they consent to. So let's just go to the next slide, to the Chupadatos slide, Jen, to look at some past projects that Mozilla has supported. So one of these is called Chupadatos, which is a multimedia project that explores privacy issues from a Latin American perspective. It's a play on words for the chupacabra, which is an urban myth of a creature that sucks your blood, but Chupadatos sucks your data. And so through a series of articles and social media posts, Joanna Veron and Coding Rights have created content specifically for women in Latin America to explore ways data is collected from their homes, their bodies, and their cities. So the form of these is quite varied. It can be long read investigative journalism projects, data visualizations. On the right, you're looking at a series of GIFs that have been made for social media, for Facebook and for Twitter. And so that project explores a variety of different media. On the next slide, we're looking at Data Selfie, which is a browser add-on that monitors what you've liked on Facebook and then passes those likes through IBM Watson's machine learning system to essentially predict your personality. So for example, based on your Facebook likes, the add-on can infer your religion, your race, and your intelligence simply from things that you've liked on Facebook. On the next slide, this is a virtual reality project called Portin' Down that screened last week at the Sheffield International Documentary Festival. This was also supported by a grant from Mozilla. So in this project, users take part in psychological experiments that were performed on British soldiers in the 1960s. So many users that take part in VR projects do not realize that VR systems actually record a stunning amount of information about our bodies as we participate. So in this experience, we simulate what it would have been like to be a participant in those experiments, and then afterwards unveil the amount of data that was collected about you in the process of watching the project. And the next slide, this is a project that's being developed right now over the summer, and it's called Ask Why. It's an upcoming social media campaign from Brazil that uses hidden camera videos strategically placed in stores, pharmacies, and other public places to see if citizens respond to unusual requests for their data. In Brazil, it is not uncommon for retailers to request far more data than is legally required. So this campaign urges users to ask why this data is being requested of them, and then post their experience to social networks. On the final example is Codemoji, which is a game that Mozilla created with an Italian design studio called Toto. And the goal here was to teach people about how encryption worked without using the usual tropes of keys and complicated math to get these ideas across. Instead, we used emojis as a cipher that would encode a message. So using the app, you typed a message you wanted to send to a friend, which was then scrambled into a series of random emojis based on an algorithm assigned to the key emoji. So this message could then be sent by email, text, or WhatsApp. And if you knew which emoji had scrambled the message, you could decipher it. And if not, the message would remain secret. And so all these examples show the breadth of approach that we want to take and support in creative media. Jen, can you go to the next slide? The importance of considering the user experience. So in our application guide, we're actually going to ask who the users of your proposed concept are. We really want to see that you have an idea in mind of who these folks are that you want to take your experience, and what that actual experience is going to be. We want to know what people will do and experience and not what you want to say. And so you can express this in a variety of different ways. I want to just make sure that with my colleagues, I'm on the right slide right now, so I'm just going to have a pause. Mm-hmm.
So Brett, maybe you can go ahead and talk about these participation opportunities for awardees, and then we can jump back to user experience. Sorry about that.
No problem. So one of the, in addition to the support financially to create the project, we want to offer awardees a variety of different experiences to help them realize this work. And so one of these is opportunity to participate at the Mozilla Festival, which is our annual celebration of internet health. And at MozFest, grantees will join the other grantees in their cohort that will be producing work throughout the year. And this is really an opportunity for us to get together and think about the impact that we want these awards to have. So in addition to that, in addition to the Mozilla Festival, we'll also provide communications support to awardees to make sure that their work gets in front of the broadest possible audience. And we also offer legal and engineering support during the process of making the work to ensure that it meets some of our guidelines for user privacy and consent in the way that data is collected. So I'm going to pause right there while we catch up our slides onto the content of where we're at in the webinar. Lindsay, do we know what most people are looking at right now?
We should be back to talking about user experience. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I can't see that. So I'm going to just reiterate that in this portion of the application guide, it's really important for us as the folks reviewing the work to not only understand your opinion and what you want to say about artificial intelligence and the quantified society, but how you're going to walk people through that process. And so there's a variety of ways that folks can do that. Jen, you want to try and take us to the slide that says, what is the user journey, which should be 21, I believe. 21, yes. This is just sometimes it's best to do this with walking people through the different pages or screens that your experience will contain. And sometimes if you go to the next slide, you really want to take a visual approach to that and walk them through something like a wireframe or a mock-up of what your interface is going to look like. And so because we support such a variety of different types of media, we can't right now tell you exactly how to walk us through that user experience. But in addition to describing it in words, we really encourage folks to submit something visual so that the review committee can have the best possible idea of how you want to realize that project. And so I think that that covered all the different participation opportunities and just that importance of the user experience. So I guess I will hand it back to you, Jen and Lindsay, to talk about the timeline and how to apply.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett. Sorry for my slide management confusion. Jen, do you want to talk about our timeline and process?
Yeah, definitely. I'll wait for the slide. Great. So this is also in the application guide, but just to talk through, you're able to submit the first part, which is the initial funding concept, which some of you who've applied for grant funding before may recognize as more of a letter of intent. So those are due by July 6th. So I know some of those have already been coming in now. But you'll see from this link, I will show you kind of some screenshots right after this, but we have a system called Flux. It's our grant management system. And that's how we will manage applications coming in and out of this awards track. I will talk about there's three decision tracks once you submit the initial funding concept. But other notable deadlines are August 1st is when the final full application deadline is. And then applicants will be notified by September 17th of the outcome for those of you who've submitted a full application. And then the awardees will be attending MozFest, which is October 23rd through the 28th. And then you'll have that time between the 17th of September and June 3rd to complete the project. If you could go to the next slide. So when you go to the link that was in the last slide, as far as, let's see, mozilla.flux.io, you will come to this landing page, which is a little bit confusing, but basically all you need to do is click down where there's a red arrow that says submit your idea. And that will take you to the next page, Lindsay. And it will look like this. So if for some reason you don't see those things, you might be in the wrong place. So check the link. But this will be where you will select Creative Media Awards from the drop-down list, which you'll see when you're in here in the live site. But this will be how you will submit your initial funding concept. If you go to the next slide. A couple of things to keep in mind when you're submitting. For the initial funding concept, you're not able to save and return to this. So we suggest that you do it in another document and then cut and paste when you're ready to hit submit. And then when you get ready to do the full application, there's not an autosave feature. So again, it's best to use another document and cut and paste, or you can hit save and return to it later, but just so you know, it doesn't automatically save. And then you can only click submit once. So please make sure that you're actually ready to do that. And then finally, Flux is not mobile friendly. So please find a desktop or a laptop to submit your letter of intent or your full application. That'll just make it easier for you. So just a couple things to keep in mind. These are all also in the application guide, but just a couple things we thought we'd mention. Next slide, Lindsay. And then finally, I know people have questions about what happens when you submit the initial funding concept. So there are basically three different decisions that are brief in the application guide, but I will talk through them now so you know. So either your submission will be rejected for not meeting criteria, which Brett had covered earlier. So make sure that your submission meets the criteria. So you'll get an email if that is the case and it doesn't meet the requirements for this track. The second option is that you'll be added to Flux and you'll receive an email with your login information. And then when you log in, you will see your initial funding concept waiting with a note about an adjustment that you need to make before it's moved on to a full application. Or finally, you will be invited to just go ahead and submit a full application. And you will also receive an email with your login information. And when you go into the system, you'll see on your dashboard the full application, which Both the initial funding concept and the full application are at the bottom of the application guide, so you can look in there for kind of what the questions will be and what you need to prepare for that. If you have problems with Flux, you are welcome to email grants@mozillafoundation.org, and you will reach our lovely grant manager, and she will be happy to answer your questions. Yeah, and now I think we're going to go into some pre-submitted questions from those of you who registered in advance. So I'll turn it back over to Lindsay.
Awesome. Thank you both. I think that's an awesome overview of both the goals and intent of this awards track as well as the process. So thank you. We have a few questions from our audience, pre-submitted questions. So let's get started. So number one was, and we received this question multiple times, does your project have to already exist, or can you submit a brand new idea? Brett, you covered this in your slides, but I think it's really important. So do you want to restate that, talk a little more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're not looking for is projects that are complete or that are not actually projects yet, but sort of a topic that you might want to explore. So for us, a concept is something that you've actually mapped out the user experience that you want to have, and a prototype is sort of a first draft of that. So they need to be at either of those stages for us to consider them.
Absolutely. So Mozilla Awards really are about supporting those promising approaches. So we need it to be mapped out, not just an idea. It really needs to be at the conceptual or prototype stage. Awesome. So the second question we received a lot was, must works be focused on English-speaking audiences, or may I submit a multi-language project? Jen, do you want to answer this one?
Yes, so you can definitely submit a multi-language project. I know there's a large geographic interest already, so definitely encourage that. But the application and the supporting materials must be submitted in English. The Flux system being the most important, but then also as the reviewers go through submissions, they need to be able to make solid assessments, and most of them are English speaking. So thanks for submitting that question a lot.
So the next one that came up a lot was, will projects that include a physical component be considered? For example, robots with an online presence. I know we talk a lot about screen-based media. So Brett, can you talk about this question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that I like to think about this is that a meaningful and substantial portion of that experience must be available online. So there can be really interesting and creative ways to capture experience that happens online. So it's okay to have something physical or potentially even site specific, but you need to offer an experience that's engaging for web users as well. So there has to be some way that somebody using the internet can experience your project, and it has to be a meaningful way that they can do it. So if it's a webcast of watching something happening in our art gallery, for us would not count. We want a really meaningful way that you can interact with that work.
So actually interactive, doing something, engaging with it, not just observing. Cool. So this next question came up a couple of times as well. So do I need to have the technical skills to complete my project, or can Mozilla or someone else help me with things like coding?
So I can take this. You have to be able to completely realize the project yourself or with a team. We may be able to assist you with specific engineering or other types of questions, but you must be able to complete the project within your own means. Mozilla, even though we have a lot of different disciplines that interact with our organization, like engineers, they are unable to concretely work on your project to realize it. That's up to you.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think it's also important as you're submitting your initial funding concept and your full application that you tell us about the skills that you have and the experience that you have to help our reviewers understand why you're the person who can complete this project. Awesome.
Agreed.
So is anyone prohibited from applying? This came up a lot of specific examples. Jen, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so this is kind of an answer, non-answer, but basically everyone is eligible to apply except for in countries where Mozilla is not allowed to fund as a foundation. We know there are a couple of countries like Iran and North Korea that are on a list, but we don't have a set list because it kind of changes over time. So if you have questions about your geographic eligibility, please email us. There'll be another email address at the end of this call, and ask so that you don't feel like you wasted time preparing a project and then find out that you're not eligible. So please feel free to contact us about that.
But in general, organizations,
Yes.
individuals, open to all.
Yes, we will. Yeah.
So if our project is a two-person collaboration, will both team members be able to attend MozFest?
Yeah, so basically each of the award packets includes $2,500 for travel stipend to attend MozFest. And there's only one of those stipends given per award. So if you decide with your team that you can get 2 people there with that money, great. If you have other ways to supplement that, that's definitely a possibility. As far as getting tickets to the actual event, that's definitely something we can help coordinate. But basically, if you have 10 people on your team, you wouldn't get 10 $2,500 stipends to travel to MozFest.
So only that one $2,500 stipend. Gotcha.
Yes, but you can all rent an apartment together.
So Brett, what is meant by screen-based? Are projects involving location-based installation and internet-based components acceptable? We just talked about this a little bit, but I think it's really critical. So do you want to restate?
Yeah. Well, I think it's clear we don't want to support projects that are only offline. So we wouldn't support a play, or only a sculpture. And I think one way to think about this is that we want you as a maker, we want to encourage you to use the medium of the internet to comment on the internet. So I shared some examples previously, and one of those was data selfie. So this sort of encapsulates that idea, because the project used your data and the web browser you use every day as the creative material of the project itself. That project wouldn't have been possible without the internet. And so these are the types of projects that we find do really well. They help personalize the issue for users. And again, we really want you to use the internet to comment on the internet. So mostly this is about how you experience the project, and we want that to be online. An offline experience such as a play, a book, or a sculpture probably wouldn't fit that description.
Yeah, and these projects are also about helping broader audiences understand these issues, right? And so we want the broad new audiences to be able to interact with and engage with these projects.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want projects as well that people can share, and that might not be possible. You might go to we've all seen an amazing show at an art gallery that we wish everyone can experience, but unless they can go to Chicago or Rio, they just can't. And so that's one of the goals of this work, is to be broadly accessible to anyone with an internet connection.
Fantastic. So we've talked about eligibility a bit, but Jen, can you talk about whether individuals can have an organizational fiscal sponsor?
Yeah, so this is definitely something that you can do. You can apply as an individual, you can apply as a team of individuals, or as an organization, which could include, universities, nonprofits, things like that. So that's definitely something that you'll see as part of the full application when you are filling that out. So if you have questions, again, you're welcome to contact us. And then going to the last slide, speaking of how to contact us, there's some additional information. So if you've gone through this webinar and you still feel a little confused about what's happening or what we're looking for, there are 3 resources we wanted to highlight as places for you to go. So the first one is the application guide, which we have this handy little short link for you, so you don't have to go to the whole PDF link. So the application guide has all the things we've covered today, and also the application itself, so you can look that over. The Internet Health Report, we didn't talk a lot about the Internet Health Report today, but it's definitely something that the foundation is very interested in seeing show up in projects. So if you're confused about what we mean by internet health, there's basically 5 principles of that, and you can read about not only what those are and how they show up, but some sample projects and ideas of ways people are bringing those to life. And then finally, the Automation and Quantified Society framing paper, which relates to the NetGain initiative. There's a link there too, so you can read that. And then if all else fails and you have not found what you need, you're welcome to email me, and my email address is there. So I will get back to you with answers to your questions. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure we will see amazing applications come in. So that concludes our webinar.
Thanks, everybody.